The audience laughed when the homeless man walked onto the stage. And honestly, that was the moment Judge Judy knew something was wrong. Because while everybody else inside the studio saw an old man in dirty clothes, she noticed the way he scanned the room. Calm, alert, controlled military behavior. Across from him sat Vanessa Reed, a rich influencer who had already built an entire live stream humiliating him online. And she still looked proud of it. But the second Judge Judy opened the military file sitting on her desk, entire room went silent. The audience started laughing before the homeless man even reached his chair. Bright studio lights reflected across the stage while cameras zoomed toward the older man wearing a faded gray jacket and worn boots. His hands looked rough from years of hard labor. And the second he sat down under the television lights, people judged him instantly. Across from him sat Vanessa Reed, expensive black blazer, and a smile that looked almost proud. The live television host tried introducing the segment carefully. Tonight's debate focuses on viral public confrontations and social media account erupted. Maybe it's about personal responsibility. Clapped. Then Daniel Mercer quietly lowered his eyes toward the floor. That detail mattered because he didn't look angry. He looked tired. Vanessa crossed her legs confidently while man stood outside a restaurant bothering customers for money. I recorded him because people deserve to know what's happening in public. More applause. Daniel stayed silent. The host looked uncomfortable already. Daniel claims the video destroyed his reputation after it received millions of views online. Vanessa shrugged casually. That's not my fault. Boom. While Daniel quietly rubbed his hands together near his lap. Then Vanessa smiled slightly. And honestly, society keeps treating people like him as victims. A few audience members laughed. Daniel slowly looked up for the first time. I asked somebody for bus fare. Vanessa instant thing. More laughter. And backstage, Judge Judy watched the live broadcast silently because the producers invited her as a surprise guest later in the episode. At first she expected another meaningless internet drama discussion. But something about Daniel immediately caught her attention. Not his clothes, not his appearance. The way he scanned the room automatically every few seconds. Military instincts. Interesting, very interesting. Back on stage, Vanessa leaned slightly forward confidently. You know what people don't understand? Stay homeless because they refuse to help themselves. Boom, that sentence changed because they refuse to help, Miss Instinct. Even the host looked nervous now. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly for the first time all night. Vanessa continued anyway. I'm tired of pretending these people deserve endless sympathy. The audience's reactions became quieter now because Daniel still hadn't attacked her, still hadn't yelled. He just looked emotionally expected. Then the host revealed something exhausted. Daniel served in the military for over 20 years. The room became quieter instantly, but only briefly. So what expression paused briefly, coldly? Military service doesn't excuse harassment. Backstage, Judge Judy narrowed her eyes immediately. Wrong answer. Daniel slowly reached into his old jacket pocket and removed a folded military photograph. The camera zoomed in automatically. A younger Daniel stood beside several soldiers near a damaged armored vehicle overseas. Smoke everywhere, dust everywhere. War. The audience became completely silent. Now Vanessa stopped smiling. The host, did you serve in Army? How long? 22 years. Judge Judy's expression changed backstage because now she knew exactly Daniel's felt familiar. PTSD, hyper-awareness, controlled emotion, survival posture. Vanessa shifted slightly in her chair for the first and ready to stop, and that would become the biggest mistake of her life. The entire studio remained quiet after Daniel revealed he served in the Army for 22 years. Even the audience looked uncomfortable now. Some of those same people had laughed at him. Vanessa noticed the atmosphere changing immediately, and she didn't like it. She crossed her arms tighter while forcing another confident smile toward the cameras. Look, I respect veterans, she said carefully. But being a veteran doesn't automatically make somebody innocent. Judge Judy, Vanessa was starting back pressure now. Good, because earlier she acted completely untouchable. The host leaned slightly toward Daniel. Can you explain what happened the night Vanessa recorded you? I stayed quiet for several seconds before Ant's ticket. Vanessa rolled her eyes again. There were customers trying to eat. Daniel slowly nodded. So I stayed near the sidewalk. You approached people. I asked politely. You scared them. Daniel finally looked directly at her. No, you embarrassed silent again. Vanessa's expression tightened slightly. Daniel continued quietly. You pointed a camera in my face before I even finished speaking. The giant studio screens behind them suddenly displayed screenshots from Vanessa's viral live stream. Millions of hundreds of thousands of comments. Comments themselves appeared. Throw him off the street. Lazy bum. People like this ruin cities. The audience atmosphere changed instantly. Because now people could actually see the damage. Daniel quietly looked down again while the giant screens behind him. Vanessa suddenly looked uncomfortable for the hairfully. The first time all night, the host spoke carefully. Did you ever ask Vanessa to remove the video? Daniel nodded. Yes. Vanessa immediately interrupted. It was already viral by then. Judge Judy narrowed her eyes backstage immediately. Another terrible Daniel reached inside his jacket again and removed several folded papers. The host accepted them carefully. The room became quiet again. Daniel continued softly. People recognized me from the video. Vanessa shifted nervously now. Daniel's voice stayed calm. I lost 2 interviews after it spread online. One audience slowly reviewed papers while cameras zoomed toward the papers. Security company rejection, warehouse rejection, maintenance work rejection, all within days of the viral live stream. Vanessa tried defending herself again. I can't control how the internet reacts. Then, suddenly, a new voice interrupted from backstage. Yes, you can. The Judge Judy walked onto the stage. Boom, instant energy shift. The audience erupted loudly while Vanessa's confidence visibly collapsed for the first time all evening. Judge Judy walked calmly toward the center of the set carrying a thick folder in her hands, not smiling, not impressed. The host looked been watching backstage. Vanessa forced a nervous smile. Well, I think sat down slowly host without taking her eyes off Vanessa. No, she replied coldly. It's actually very simple. Silence. Judge Judy placed the thick file onto the desk carefully. I spent 30 minutes listening to a wealthy woman explain why humiliating a struggling veteran online somehow makes her the victim. Boom, the audience reacted instantly. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Judge Judy continued Chambers without knowing a single thing about his life. Vanessa crossed her arms defensively again. He was bothering customers. Judge Judy immediately her glasses slightly. Interesting, because according to witness statements from the restaurant manager, Vanessa stopped moving. Mr. Mercer never threatened anyone. The audience reacted again. In fact, employees described him as polite and respectful. Vanessa's face visibly changed, and Judge Judy was only getting started. The audience remained completely silent. While Judge Judy flipped through the witness statements inside the folder, Vanessa tried maintaining her composure, but the confidence from earlier was disappearing fast. The restaurant manager stated that Mr. Mercer stayed near the sidewalk the entire evening. Vanessa looked nervous immediately. Judge Judy continued reading. The live stream started before any complaints were even made. Boom, the audience reacted instantly. Vanessa shook her head quickly. That's not true. Judge Judy slowly looked up. You're calling multiple witness statements false? Vanessa hesitated. I just think they misunderstood the situation. Judge, think you misunderstood the situation. Silence, dangerous silence. Daniel sat quietly beside the desk while cameras slowly zoomed closer toward his tired face. Earlier, the audience saw a homeless man. Now they were starting to see something else. Someone damaged by life. Judge Judy continued calmly. You saw a vulnerable person and recognized an opportunity for content. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly instantly. What's unfair is turning another human being into internet entertainment. Boom. The crowd reacted again. Vanessa's breathing visibly changed now. Judge Judy picked up several printed screenshots appeared under with them in section. These comments appeared belongs in jail. Another page. People like him are dangerous. Another. Somebody should beat him up. The studio became deeply uncomfortable. Daniel lowered his eyes toward noticed immediately, and that detail bothered her more than anything else because Daniel still wasn't angry. He looked ashamed, like the entire internet convinced him he deserved humiliation. Judge Judy lowered the screenshots carefully. You exposed a struggling veteran to millions of strangers. Vanessa finally snapped defensively. I didn't tell people to attack him. Judge Judy's expression hardened instantly. Boom, even the audience stayed silent after that line. Vanessa rubbed her hands together nervously while trying not to look toward the giant screens behind her. Judge Judy continued reading through the file. Then suddenly she paused. She slowly removed another document from deeper inside the folder. Military records. The atmosphere inside the studio shifted instantly. Judge looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Mercer, were you awarded a Purple Heart? The audience gasped quietly. Daniel nodded once. Yes, Mom. Vanessa continued carefully reviewing the military file, multiple overseas deployments, combat injuries, medical trauma evaluations. And suddenly Judy slowly looked back toward Vanessa. Did you know any of this before humiliating him online? Vanessa swallowed hard. No. Judge Judy's voice became colder. But you posted him anyway. Silence. Judge Judy then lifted another paper from the file. This says Mr. Mercer suffers from severe PTSD connected to combat exposure. Now, Judge Judy continued calmly. Night terrors, anxiety episodes, housing instability after military discharge. Vanessa looked emotionally shaken for the first time all evening. Judge Judy leaned slightly forward again. And while he was dealing with all of that, she held up the live stream screenshots. Boom, the emotional pressure inside the studio became boom. The emotional pressure inside the studio unbearable. Daniel quietly stared down at his hands while the military photograph again, younger Daniel, covered in dust. Standing beside soldiers near destroyed military vehicles, a completely different life. Judge Judy looked the image silently for seconds. Then Daniel hesitated. The entire studio waited quietly. My daughter got sick. Instant silence. Vanessa slowly looked up again. Judge Judy softened slightly. She passed away, looked, nodded once. Cancer. The audience remained continued quietly. After she died, everything collapsed. And for the first time since the show start, Vanessa looked genuinely guilty. The studio became completely silent after Daniel mentioned his daughter. Nobody laughed and he moved. Vanessa sat frozen in her chair while Judge Judy slowly closed the military file in front of her. Atmosphere inside the studio no longer felt like a television debate. Now it felt personal. Judge Judy looked carefully toward Daniel. When was your daughter when she passed away? 19. Booms, the woman Parsons visibly reacted emotionally. She was the one person who still believed I could rebuild my life after the army. Judge Judy nodded slowly, and after she died, that's when I stopped functioning. The silence inside the sonas of the studio came emotionally shaken now, because only Mosley Jali continued reviewing the medical police paperwork connected to Daniel's PTSD treatment and housing instabilities, emergency shelter applications, veteran support requests. The deeper she looked into his history, worse Vanessa's livestream started to look. Judge Judy slowly looked back toward Vanessa. Do you understand something now that you clearly did nodded weakly? Judge Judy's expression stayed cold. No, say it. Vanessa swallowed hard. I judged him without knowing anything about him. Vanessa's voice cracked slightly. I judged him without knowing anything about him. Boom. The audience stayed completely silent. And then you handed millions of strangers permission to do the same thing. That line hit the studio hard. Vanessa quietly wiped tears from her face while avoiding eye contact with Daniel completely now. This says your livestream earned over $30,000 in ad revenue and sponsorship traffic. The audience reacted immediately. Vanessa looked embarrassed. Judge Judy continued calmly. So while Mr. Mercer was losing job opportunities and proselytizing, you were profiting. Bosom. Another devastating moment. Vanessa rubbed her forehead nervously. I didn't think it would go this far. That sentence becomes meaningless. Damage is done. Silence. Judge Judy leaned slightly forward again. You know what bothers me most about this situation? Vanessa looked up weakly. It's not the camera. Judge Judy held up a screenshot from the livestream. The giant studio automatically on Vanessa laughing beside Daniel during the viral broadcast. The audience became deeply uncomfortable again. Judge Judy stared directly at Vanessa. You looked proud of humiliating him. But Judge Judy still wasn't interested in crying harder yet. But Judge Daniel never received sympathy when the internet destroyed him. Judge Judy pointed toward the massive screens displaying hateful comments. Vanessa covered her mouth while crying quietly. Judge Judy's voice became colder. You taught millions of strangers move. The emotional pressure kept building heavier and heavier. Then Daniel quietly spoke again. Judge Judy looked toward him carefully, because people recognized. Daniel nodded. Teenagers would film me sometimes. The audience reacted emotionally again. Vanessa closed her eyes immediately. Judge Judy noticed. Good. Because now the humiliation finally reached the person. Judy then asked something. Miss Reed, have you ever struggled or confused? Survive. What? Answer the question. No, Judge Judy nodded slowly. That's obvious. Boom. The audience reacted immediately. Vanessa looked completely shattered now. Judge Judy continued calmly. Privilege becomes dangerous when it removes empathy. The silence inside the studio became overwhelming. Daniel quietly stared at the old judge military photograph. Younger's Daniel alive. Strong. Crowds before grief destroyed everything. Judge Judy looked toward the photograph again herself, then suddenly asked this picture. Daniel swallowed. My daughter. Judge Judy flipped the photograph over carefully. A handwritten message covered the back. A handwritten message covered the back. Then her read silently for several completely, even more deeply than before. Vanessa noticed immediately the photograph and quietly asked, Did your daughter write this before she died? Daniel nodded once, and suddenly the entire studio felt emotionally broken. The entire studio stayed silent while Judge Judy held the photograph in her hands. Nobody moved, nobody whispered, even the emotionally frozen now. Judge Judy slowly adjusted her glasses before reading part of the handwritten note aloud. I know you think the world stopped caring about you after the war. Boom. The emotional impact inside the studio was immediate. Daniel lowered his head quietly while trying to hold himself together. Vanessa covered her mouth again as tears rolled down her face. Judge Judy carefully placed the photograph on it was something fragile. When was this? This written, she asked softly. Daniel's voice almost cracked. A few months before she died. The audience looked devastated now. The audience, no, slowly Daniel continued quietly. She used to carry that picture everywhere. He glanced toward the old military photograph. She said it reminded her. I survived things most people couldn't imagine. The Judge Judy listened carefully while Daniel explained how his PTSD worsened after losing his daughter. He struggled sleeping, lost stable work, fell behind on bills, eventually lost his apartment. But I never stopped trying, he added quietly. Vanessa looked, she called him emotionally destroyed now. Because early noticed the guilt spreading across Vanessa viewers, Judge Judy noticed the guilt spreading across confronting consequences instead of chasing attention. Judge Judy turned sharply toward her. Do you understand what your live stream actually did? Vanessa nodded weakly through tears. Judge Judy's expression stayed cold. No, say it clearly. I turned him into entertainment. Boom. Another devastating silence hit the room. Judge Judy nodded slowly. And millions of strangers followed your Venja. Junas up several printed screenshots from the live stream comments again. These comments weren't random accidents. She came from the tone you created. The audience remained completely silent. Judge Judy then looked back toward Daniel carefully. Mr. Mercer, Daniel stayed quiet for several seconds before answering. The shame. That one word hit harder than any speech, Daniel continued softly. My daughter spent years trying to convince me I still mattered. The room became still again. Vanessa, millions of people watched somebody laugh at me like I was worthless. But nobody inside the studio felt sorry for her anymore. Not yet. Judge Judy's voice became, you know what social media has done to people? Nobody answered. It has convinced them humiliation isn't real unless blood is involved. Judge Judy pointed toward Daniel. But emotional humiliation leaves scars too. Daniel stared quietly at the floor while the giant studio screens behind him continued displaying the old military photograph beside screenshots from Vanessa's live stream. Two completely different realities. One man who served his country, and another version of him slowly shook her head. Judge, she looked directly at Vanessa, and somehow his deepest humiliation came from a woman holding a phone. The studio became silent again. Vanessa whispered softly through tears, "I'm sorry." Judge Judy immediately replied, "Him suffer." Boom, before millions of people watched him suffer. Vanessa lowered her head completely now. No confidence left, no influencer persona left, no control left. Judge Judy then looked toward the host. How many views did the live stream receive? The host checked the production monitor nervously. The audience went across quietly again. Judge Judy nodded slowly. 8 million people watched a struggling veteran get publicly humiliated for entertainment. The sentence felt heavy enough to crush the room. Daniel quietly rubbed his hands together while trying to stay composed. Then suddenly Judge Judy asked him something unexpected. "If your daughter were alive today, what do you think she'd say seeing all of this?" Daniel's eyes immediately filled with tears. The studio became completely still. He looked down quietly before answering. "She'd probably tell me not to hate people for being cruel." And honestly, that line broke the entire room emotionally. After Daniel finished speaking, entire studio fell silent. No applause. No reactions. Nothing silence, because everybody inside the room suddenly realized something uncomfortable. The homeless veteran, sitting under the bright television lights, had shown more dignity than anyone else there all night. Vanessa quietly cried beside him, while cameras slowly zoomed out across the stage. Earlier, she entered the show, smiling confidently, convinced she was about to win another public argument online. Now she looked emotionally shattered. Judge Judy remained completely calm while organizing the final paperwork in front of her. Then she finally spoke again. "I've spent decades watching people inside courtrooms." The audience listened carefully. "And one thing I've learned is this." She paused briefly. "Cruelty becomes most dangerous when it starts looking entertaining." Boom! The sentence hit the studio hard. Judge Judy continued calmly. Millions of people watched that live stream and forgot they were looking at a human being. Daniel quietly stared at the old military photograph resting beside him. Judge Judy looked toward it again herself. Young soldiers. Smoke. War. Fear. A completely different life. Then she looked back toward Vanessa. "You built content from another person's suffering." Vanessa nodded weakly through tears. Judge Judy's voice became sharper. "And worse, you profited from it." Silence. The giant screens behind the stage displayed the live stream statistics. Again, 8 million views, thousands of hateful comments, massive engagement spikes, all created from humiliating one struggling veteran. Judge Judy slowly leaned back in her chair. The internet rewards attention. She pointed gently toward Daniel. "But people like him pay the price for it." Nobody moved. Nobody even whispered. Judge Judy then turned toward the audience itself. "And honestly, some of you should feel uncomfortable too." Boom! The crowd froze immediately, because earlier they laughed too. Judge Judy noticed several audience members lowering their eyes instantly. Good. Because now everybody inside the studio was finally confronting what happened instead of treating it like television. "Drama," Judge Judy continued calmly. "Humiliation becomes powerful when crowds participate in it." Vanessa quietly covered her face again while crying. Judge Judy wasn't finished. She looked directly toward the cameras broadcasting live across the country. "People online love pretending cruelty isn't serious if somebody records it with a phone instead of their fists." Dangerous silence filled the studio again. But emotional damage is still damage. Daniel quietly nodded to himself while listening. Judge Judy softened slightly when looking back toward him. "Mr. Mercer." Daniel looked up. "I cannot undo what happened to you." The room became still again. "But I hope today reminded you that your value as a human being was never decided by strangers online." Daniel's eyes watered immediately. He nodded quietly. "Thank you." Judge Judy then looked back toward Vanessa one final time. Young people spend so much time chasing attention that they forget something important. Vanessa slowly looked up through tears. Judge Judy's expressions stayed cold. The internet moves on in hours. She pointed gently toward Daniel. But humiliation stays with people for years. Boom! That line completely destroyed the last bit of emotional control Vanessa still had left. She broke down, crying openly now. No influencer image, no confidence, no control, just regret. Real regret. Judge Judy slowly gathered the final paperwork together while the television crew remained unusually quiet behind the cameras. Then, right before ending the segment, she delivered one final sentence that left the studio completely silent. Character is revealed most clearly by how you treat people who cannot benefit you. Nobody spoke afterward because there was nothing left to say. And as Daniel quietly picked up the old military photograph before leaving the stage, audience no longer saw a homeless man. They saw someone the world failed long before social media ever did.